In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a guide on every single fruit in Blox Fruits, as well as some tricks to use for all of them. So first up, we got the literal worst fruit in all of Blox Fruits, the Kilo Fruit. This fruit costs a total of 5,000 belly or 50 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer, and it has a 100% chance of being in stock. Its first ability is called 10,000 kg, and the user basically just changes their weight to 1,000 kg and smashes the ground, dealing a bunch of area damage. The X ability is called 20,000 kg, and this one is kind of similar to the X ability, but you send a shockwave forward, but it deals a bit more damage. The C ability is called 50,000 kg, and this is just a better version of the X ability, where you just smash the ground super hard, dealing more damage than the Z ability, but for this one you even stun the enemies for a bit. The F ability is called Lighten, and for this one you basically just spawn in an umbrella, and as long as you keep holding the F key down, keep flying higher and higher until you reach nowhere. Pretty good thing about this fruit is that it's always in stock, so you can pretty much get it whenever you want, and also it's really cheap. And if you have this fruit equipped, then you probably want to get a different fruit as soon as possible.
Bye, have a great time.
Next up, we got the Spin Fruit. This fruit costs a total of 7,500 belly or 75 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. It also has a 100% chance of being in stock and a 13% chance of spawning randomly. Its first ability is called Razor Wind, and basically this is where their user spins their hand and makes a bunch of wind slashes that do a bunch of damage to anybody that's standing in front of them. The X ability is called Tornado Assault, and the user spins their whole body to make a tornado that deals a decent amount of damage and sends their opponents flying into the air. The C ability is called Spinning Bomber, and this is where the user spins and fires 5 different bombs that deal a good amount of damage. The F ability is called Helicopter Fly, and for this one, you just turn your head and hands into a helicopter and you just start flying forward. It looks pretty funny if you ask me. In its pros, this fruit is pretty similar to the Kilo Fruit. It's always in stock and a pretty cheap fruit to buy, but this is probably not the best choice. Next up, we got the Chop Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 30,000 belly or 100 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. It has a 35% chance of being in stock and a 15% chance of spawning. And a really good thing about this fruit is that you have complete sword immunity, even if the user has aura. The Z ability is called Tackle. This is where you just separate your torso from your legs and you just lunge forward, hitting anybody that's in front of you. The X ability is called Dance. And for this one, you just separate all your body parts and you turn into this weird tornado kind of thing, and you deal a good amount of damage if you run into someone. The C ability is called Party. And for this one, your fists basically separate from the rest of your body, doing a barrage of attacks and punches. And this move lasts longer the longer it's held down, and it doesn't let your opponent escape it, even if they have observation. And the flying ability for this one is called Helicopter, similar to the Spin Fruit, but this time it's the back part of your body, and it looks pretty funny as well. Overall, this fruit is really decent beginner fruit, and if you're new to the game, this is something you definitely want to keep your eye on. But it has really bad range, so fighting players from afar is a big no-no. Next on the list is the Spring Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 60,000 belly or 180 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. You can also get this fruit from killing a boss called Jeremy in the second sea. So its first ability is called Knock, and for this one you basically just send your fist flying forward, dealing a bunch of damage. The X ability is called Spring Snipe, and for this one you basically just lunge forward using springs on the back of your feet. If anybody's in your way, you just run into them and do a bunch of damage. The next ability is called Spring Cannon, and you basically jump into the air and fall right back down, and if anybody's standing there, they take a bunch of damage. The V ability is called Spring Emperor, and for this one you turn both your legs into springs and you start jumping all over the place. Next up, we got the Movement ability, and this one is called Spring Leap. And then you start bouncing off a bunch of walls, gaining a bunch of speed and momentum while you're doing it. But keep in mind, you do have to have a bunch of buildings around, because if there's no buildings, then where are you gonna bounce on? Okay, so the next fruit on the list is called the Bomb Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 80,000 belly or 220 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It has a 24% chance of being in stock and a 14% chance of spawning randomly. So the first ability is called Targeted Bomb, and this is basically wherever you're pointing, you can charge a bomb with your mouse cursor. It sends them flying into the sky. The X ability is called Bomb Grab. Upon contact with the enemy, they grab the enemy and then releases an explosion, which flings them far away. The C ability is called Landmines, and this is where the user can create a bunch of mines in a certain range. Anybody that walks into them will take a bunch of damage. And keep in mind, these mines are only visible to the person that uses them, so other players cannot see them. The V ability is called Self-Destruct, and if you click it once, it creates a huge explosion. But you can actually charge up this ability, so if you hold it down for a bunch of time until it's fully charged and then let go, it becomes an S+ level ability. The F ability is called Explosive Jump, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You basically just get around doing a bunch of explosions. The best thing about this fruit overall is it's really fun for trolling, especially your friends and other players. But it's pretty bad for long range, so I don't recommend this for fighting other people. Next up is the smoke fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 100,000 belly, or 250 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit has a 25% chance of being in stock and a 13% chance of spawning. This is probably the best starter fruit that any player can get. It's an elemental fruit, so as long as you're fighting enemies that don't have hockey, you'll take absolutely no damage while grinding. So the first ability is called Smoke Slam. The user turns their hand into smoke and then slams it onto the ground, dealing a bunch of damage. And the X ability is called Smoke Blast. Fires forward a smoke cloud, which on impact leaves a smoke effect, slashing the enemy multiple times. The C ability is called Smoke Liberation, and this is where you blast out a tornado, which does a really good amount of area damage. And now we got probably the best ability and considered a really good starter fruit for grinding. Smoke Bomber. The user basically turns into an airplane and you can just fly around dropping a bunch of smoke bombs where you go. And the best thing about it is that it's infinite, so as long as you're holding the key down, you can fly around dealing a bunch of damage. And if you fly above your enemies, they won't even be able to hit you. It's amazing for grinding, and really decent for combos, especially if you combine it with Electric Claw. But a bad thing is that its range is not that good compared to other fruits. So next up we got the Spike Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 180,000 belly or 380 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. Its stock chance and spawn chance are completely unknown, but it's a pretty common fruit. The Z ability is called Spike Summon, and this is exactly what it sounds like. You just summon a bunch of spikes where your cursor is, and if you hold down the ability, the spikes become way bigger. The X ability is called Whirlwind, and the user spins their arms around, dealing a bunch of damage. And the longer it's held, the more damage it does. The C ability is called Spiky Ball, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just turn into a spiky ball and you can just roll at your enemies. And if you hit them, you just drag them along with you and they can't do anything to escape it. The V ability is called Spike Barrage, and this is where you summon a bunch of spikes in a row in the direction you're facing. And the longer you hold it down, the bigger the spikes get. The good thing about this fruit is that it does really decent damage for how much it costs. But it's pretty bad for grinding, and if you have this fruit, you want to switch to a different one as soon as possible. Okay, so now on to the Flame Fruit. The Flame Fruit is an elemental type fruit and it costs 250,000 belly or 550 Robux. And it has a 30% chance of being in stock and a 12% chance of spawning. And this is the worst fruit in the game that actually has an awakening. And for its price and rarities, overall a pretty decent fruit. It's really useful for early game players, but not so good for people that are a higher level. And it has some decent PvP potential, but you probably want to upgrade to a different fruit as soon as you can. So the first ability for the Flame Fruit is called Fire Bullets. You just shoot small fireballs at the target. The second ability is called Burning Blast, and this one you shoot a huge fireball at the direction you're aiming. The next ability is called Fire Golem, and this is kind of similar to the Bomb Fruit Self-Destruct, kind of like a fire tornado that just shoots up fire into the sky. Pretty cool and decent damage. Next up is Flame Destroyer, and this you charge up a ball of fire above your head and then you can shoot it wherever you want. Finally, the F ability is called Rocket Flight, and this is kind of similar to the Light Fruit's ability, but it's just a bit slower version and you can change directions. The good things about this fruit is that it's decent for medium to long range, and it's also pretty good for grinding bosses. And since it only costs 250 belly, it's a really affordable price for the first C players. The pretty bad thing about this fruit is that almost every single ability can be easily dodged with Flash Step. But overall, still a pretty decent fruit in my opinion. Okay, so now on to the Falcon Fruit, and the Falcon Fruit is a beast type Blox Fruit, and it costs a total of 300,000 belly or 650 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. It's an uncommon fruit and its stock chance and spawn chance are completely unknown. The Z ability is called Plumage. It's when the user has a semi-transformation, growing a pair of wings on their back, and it also boosts the user's defense and making their air jump go much higher. The X ability is called Windburst, and the user launches a blast of wind, flapping their wings, and the attack goes in the direction where the user is looking. The C ability is called Bone Crusher. This is when the user charges at an enemy and just slams them into a floor, dealing a decent amount of damage. And the V ability is called Soaring Talons, and this ability locks the user in place, dealing damage several times. And this move is pretty decent for combos for first C players. And finally we have the F ability, which is called Flight, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You literally just become a falcon, like the fruit says, and you can just fly wherever you want. Obviously, a good thing about this fruit is that its mobility is really good. It has a lot of attacks that launch you forward. But a big downside to this is that it's really bad for grinding, and you need really good aim to actually make it useful in PvP. But overall, for being the cheapest beast fruit in the game, I think it's alright. Okay, Okay, so next up is the Ice Fruit, and the Ice Fruit costs a total of 350,000 belly, or 750 from the Blox Fruit dealer. It's an elemental fruit and its rarity is uncommon. It has a 15% chance of being in stock and a 14% chance of spawning. And this fruit is one of the few fruits in the game that also has an awakening. And did you know that the Ice Fruit is the only fruit in the game that literally has 3 different passive abilities? Since it's an elemental fruit, you can't get hit with opponents unless they have their hockey activated. The next one is called Frostwalker, which literally lets you walk on water by freezing it. And the third one is called Ice Trident, where you basically just get a free trident that you can use for whatever you want. Okay, so the first ability is called Ice Spear, and you just shoot a bunch of small ice projectiles. It's similar to the Flame Fruit, but obviously they're made out of ice. The next one is called Ice Surge, and this is where you spawn a bunch of ice spikes, and this ability deals a decent amount of knockback and a good amount of damage to players, and this ability also breaks observation, which makes it pretty good to use in combos. The third ability is called Ice Bird, and this is basically where you shoot a bird at someone, and it freezes the player that's hit. You can actually control where the bird goes, but you need really good aim to do that. And finally, we have the V ability, which is called Glacial Sport. It just forms a bunch of crystals around, and if a player is standing inside this, they get frozen for a good amount of time, leaving them completely open to attacks. Really good thing about this fruit is that since it's an elemental and it has a sword as its passive ability, it's really good for leveling up, especially for first and second C players. But a bad thing about this ability is that when you use the Glacial Sport ability, you can't do any damage until the opponent completely defrosts. And this fruit also takes a good amount of energy to use, especially when you try walking on water. Overall, with the 3 passive abilities this has, it's a really good fruit, and you should definitely get your hands on it. Next up is a Sand Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 420,000 belly, or 850 Robux. This fruit is also an elemental fruit, and it has a 15% chance of being in stock, but only a 3% chance of spawning randomly. And this is also one of the few fruits in the game with an awakening. The first ability is called Desert Sword, and this is where the player creates a burst of sand in front of themselves, and launching up anybody that's hit into the sky. The second ability is called Desert Funeral. It's basically where you trap the player inside a huge ball, pulling them into the air and crushing them. The C ability is called Sand Tornado, and this is where the player creates a really small sand tornado that launches the player into the sky, dealing a pretty decent amount of damage. The V ability is called Heavy Sand, and the player creates a ball of sand in their hand and shoots it at their opponent. This attack has high knockback and does a pretty good amount of damage to the enemy. And finally, we got the Movement ability. And this is where the player turns their legs into sand, allowing them to fly at a slow pace. A really good thing about this fruit is that when it's awakened, it has really insane combo potential. And because of its stuns, it's also really good for killing bosses. But a bad thing about this fruit is that you die twice as fast in water. And keep in mind, when you use this fruit's awakened abilities, it also lags your computer quite a bit, so make sure you're running on a pretty good PC before your game just crashes mid-fight. So next up on the list, we got the Dark Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 500,000 belly, or 950 Robux. It has a 15% chance of being in stock and an 8.5% chance of spawning in-game. This fruit also has an awakening, and it costs a total of 14,500 fragments to fully awaken. So the Z ability for this fruit is called Dark Rocks, and this is really similar to the Flame Fruit's first ability. It's basically the same thing, but it's made out of darkness instead of fire. The next ability, which is the X ability, is called Black Spiral, and this one has a 40 mastery requirement, and it creates a black hole on where the user's cursor is, trapping anybody that's caught in it. The C ability is called Black Hole, and this one spawns a black hole, but this time on the floor, and it causes damage to anybody that gets trapped in this. Next up is the V ability, and this one is called Dark Bomb, and it has a 110 mastery requirement. Creates a huge orb of darkness above their head that they can charge to whatever level they want, and it drags any nearby targets inside, dealing a huge amount of damage. The really good thing about this fruit is it's known in the community as one of the best stun fruits in the game, making it really useful for combos, especially if you're really good at PvP. But a pretty bad thing about the unawakened version of this fruit is that it can only do ground fights, so if you're fighting against someone that can fly, then you should probably run away. Next up is the Revive Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 550,000 belly, or 975 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This is an uncommon natural fruit that has a 10% chance of being in stock and an 8% chance of spawning. So the Z ability for this fruit is called Possession, and basically you launch your soul in the direction that you're looking at, and then you automatically get teleported to where your soul goes. The next ability is called Soul Ruler, and the user unleashes a green mist with the shape of a skull around themselves, causing an explosion and stuns enemies within range. The C ability is called Resurrection. So if this move is equipped and the user just ends up dying, like you literally lose all of your health, you will get resurrected with 50% of your original health. And for dramatic effect, it also transforms you into a skeleton. And the F ability is called Wandering Soul, and for this one, the user's soul leaves their body, being able to fly around for a short amount of time. But the user's normal body is left behind, and they can kind of be attacked and return to their original body. A really good thing about this food is it pairs really well with the Soul Cane because of its semi-quick attacks. Another plus one is that it can freeze and stun opponents, giving it really good combo potential. But overall, a pretty bad thing about this food I would say is that all of its abilities are really close range, so if you're fighting someone from far away, then it's probably not a fight that you should be taking. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we got the Diamond Fruit, and this is a natural type Blox Fruit that costs 600,000 belly or 1,000 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. And a pretty cool thing about this fruit, it's one of the 2 fruits in the game that has a sparkling effect in its physical form. This fruit has a 9% stock chance and an 8% chance of spawning. So first up, we got the Z ability, and this one is called Encrust, and this one is in the fruit's name. You literally turn yourself into a diamond. And next up is the X ability called Beaming Tackle, and this one is pretty simple. You just tackle an NPC or player that's next to you. The C ability is called Diamond Hail, and you fire a lot of shards from your hand, and the amount of shards that you fire depends on how long you hold the key for. The V ability, it's called Solar Flare, and this is where you release a huge blast of light which blinds nearby enemies. This kind of seems like a light fruit ability to me. What do you guys think? Good thing about this fruit is that it has really good damage resistance, so it can tank bosses and really high level players' attacks. And it's also pretty decent for sword mains. And the C ability requires a good amount of accuracy to hit it, so if your aim is bad, then this is probably not the fruit you want to be using. Okay, so now onto the Light Fruit. The Light Fruit is an elemental type Blox Fruit that costs 650,000 belly or 1,100 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. And this fruit has a 20% chance of being in stock and only a 13% chance of spawning in every hour. And this fruit is probably one of the best fruits that you can get for the first sea. Because similar to the Ice Fruit, it also has a passive ability that makes it really good for grinding. Keep in mind this fruit also does have an awakening, which costs a total of 14,500 fragments. So the first ability is called Light Ray, and this is similar to the Fire Fruit's ability. You just kind of shoot small beams of light in the direction of your cursor and it deals a decent amount of damage. And the X ability is called Barrage of Light. This is where it just TPs your character above, and then as long as you hold the key down, it just spams a bunch of light abilities exactly where you're aiming. But it's pretty inaccurate. Next up is Reflection Kick. You kind of do zigzag teleports and then you slam yourself into the floor, and hopefully that's where your enemy's standing. The V ability is called Skybeam Barrage, and this is where you can choose an area to launch the attack, and it basically just hails down a bunch of light meteors on the circle. And finally, we got the movement ability, and this one is called Light Flight, and this is the fastest traveling fruit in the whole game. But keep in mind, once you start using the Light Flight, you can't really change direction unless you have the fruit awakened. It's really good for players that are starting off, and it has pretty high damage for the first sea, making it a fruit that's good for grinding and also for PvP. This is a pretty cool thing that I didn't know about the Light Fruit. The lower your health is, the faster your Light Flight ability will fly. So if you're literally 1 HP, the fruit should be a lot faster than what it normally is. Okay, so moving on, we got the Rubber Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 750,000 belly or 1,200 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. It has a 13% chance of being in stock and only a 7.1% chance of randomly spawning. And this fruit also has a really unique passive ability. You basically have immunity to the Rumble Fruit, Electric, the Pole First form, and all guns in the game, even if the user has Hockey activated. And did I mention you also have a second passive ability? This one's called Pistol, and it's your mouse 1 attack. If you click mouse 1, you kind of just punch the air. Moving on, we got the Z ability, and this one is called Cannon. And once you release the ability, the user springs their arms back, dealing a huge blow to the opponent in front of them. And the X ability is called Smash. This is where you kind of just stretch your foot into the air and just slam it into the floor, dealing a good amount of damage and pretty decent knockback. The C ability is called Rush. This is where you lock a user in place and deal a huge amount of punches to them. And the amount of punches you do depends on how long you hold the key for. Next up is the Transformation. When you transform, you start releasing steam off your body. It makes all the other abilities deal more damage and get a lot faster. Finally, we got the F ability, which is called String Shot. And basically what you can do with this is you can launch yourself into players, or using inanimate objects, you can launch yourself across the map. Really good thing about this fruit is when it's in its transformation, it has really high damage output and really decent combat potential. And every single one of its moves has an area of effect, making it good for fighting multiple people at the same time. And since this fruit's abilities in the transformation are really good, that means that when you don't have your transformation equipped, it makes the fruit kinda bad. But overall, it's still a really good fruit and one of the coolest fruits in the game. Okay, so moving on, we got the barrier fruit, and this one costs a total of 800,000 belly, or 1,250 Robux. And the stock chance is only 8%, with the spawn chance being 7.8. The first ability is called Barrier Wall. You just fire medium/rectangle that acts as a barrier, and no matter how much damage someone does to it, you cannot break it. But it does have a time limit and it despawns after that. Okay, so the X ability is called Surprise Attack, and this is where the player teleports to their cursor and spams down into the ground, dealing a good amount of area damage. The C ability is called Barrier Prison, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You just encase your opponent in a barrier prison and you just constantly deal damage to them. And no matter what they do, you cannot escape this ability until it's over. Next up is the V ability, and this one is called Barrier Towers. You just summon 5 large barriers in front of you that slams into the ground, dealing huge amounts of damage to anyone that gets caught in it. Finally, we got another pretty unique movement ability. This one is called Stairs, and basically what it does is that as long as you keep holding down the key, it keeps producing stairs in front of you. And if you keep walking on them, the range you can go is infinite. It's a really good fruit for defending, and that's what it specializes in. And since it's good for defending, it's also really good for trolling. Since the barriers are indestructible, you can kind of trap people in it if you do it correctly. A bad thing about this fruit is that it's not recommended to use this against NPCs, because it's kind of bad for group attacks, but you can probably use it against bosses. And another bad thing is that most of its moves are really slow and they're pretty easy to dodge. So this is not really the ideal fruit that you want to be getting. Now moving on, we got the Magma Fruit, and this one costs a total of 850,000 belly, or 1,300 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. This is a rare fruit that has a 10% stock chance and only a 7.3% chance of spawning in-game. And this fruit is probably one of the best for sea beast hunting, which gives you a lot of money. Did I also mention this fruit has an awakening, which costs a total of 14,500 fragments. This one, similar to the ice fruit, has a really cool passive ability in its awakened form, which just lets you walk on water by creating magma blobs under you. And obviously, since you're literally made out of lava, you're immune to all lava that's placed around the map. Okay, so the Z ability is called Magma Clap, and this is where the player creates 2 huge hands on their back and you kind of just clap. If a player gets caught in between, it deals a good amount of damage. The X ability is called Magma Eruption, and it creates a magma eruption under them, dealing a good amount of damage and knockback. The C ability is called Magma Fist, and this is exactly what it sounds like, where you can aim and shoot a huge fist out of your hand, dealing a good amount of damage and leaving a blob of magma that stays and deals damage for a good amount of time. The V ability is called Magma Meteors, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It creates 3 huge meteors that will launch exactly where your cursor is pointing. But keep in mind, you do need 140 mastery for this. Magma Floor, and this one you kind of just transform into a small blob of magma, and then if you go underneath people like this, you can deal a lot of damage to them. But keep in mind, they can also deal damage to you. You are not invincible. Good thing about this fruit is that it's extremely versatile due to its many passive abilities, and it's one of the best fruits for grinding in the whole of Blox Fruits, only second to the Buddha. And also, this fruit is not really that specialized for PvP as it is a grinding fruit. Now we got the Quake Fruit, and this is a natural type Blox Fruit that costs 1 million belly, or 1,500 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. And this is the first legendary fruit that we got on this list. It has a 6% stock chance and a 6.4% chance of spawning in-game. And this is also a fruit with an awakening that costs a total of 17,000 fragments. And the Z ability is called Quake Punch, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You kind of just punch the air, and if there's a player standing there, you deal a good amount of damage. The X ability is called Quake Wave. It sends a huge shockwave in the direction you're looking at. And if a user gets hit by this, they take a good amount of knockback and their screen shakes really rapidly. The C ability is called Quake Erupt, and basically what this does is exactly where the player is standing, it kind of creates a quake eruption into the sky, launching people into the sky and dealing a good amount of damage. And finally, we got the V ability, which is called Dual Tsunami, and this is an S tier ability, and it's literally impossible to dodge, because it just spawns in 2 huge tsunamis that completely engulf where you're pointing at. It's basically guaranteed to hit who you want it to hit. Really good thing about this ability is obviously that it's really specialized towards PvP and deals a good amount of damage. And it's kind of hard to miss these abilities since they have really large hitboxes. Bad thing is that you have to awaken the fruit to maximize its abilities completely. Don't get me wrong, I mean, even the unawakened version is really good, but if you want to maximize its potential, you have to awaken it. Next on the list is the Buddha Fruit, and the Buddha Fruit costs a total of 1,200,000 belly, or 1,650 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. This fruit has a 5% stock chance and a 6.6% chance of spawning in game. And it also has an awakening, which costs a total of 14,500 fragments. The Z ability is called Transform, and it's basically where you just transform into a Buddha. The X ability is called Impact, and this is exactly what it sounds like. You kinda just impact the floor with a huge ball of energy. The C ability is called Buddha Leap. You just leap, and once you hit the ground, you deal a good amount of area damage. Buddha Explosion is kinda similar to the self-destruct move of the Bomb Fruit. You just release a huge blob of energy from exactly where you're standing, dealing a huge amount of damage to players standing in your area. Really good thing about this fruit is, like I said before, it's literally the best for grinding raids in the first, second, and third sea. And if you combine Sharkman Karate with it and Hockey, it just becomes unstoppable. A pretty bad thing about this fruit is that you have to be in your transformation to use all of its abilities. So if you're in a free-for-all battle against other players, you will probably become the target if you transform. Next up is the Love Fruit, and costs a total of 1,300,000 belly, or 1,700 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It has an 8% stock chance and a 7.75% chance of spawning randomly. And this fruit also has a pretty unique passive ability. Basically, when you do damage to someone with this fruit, it makes the other player fall in love with you, making them do less damage to you temporarily. So first up is the Z ability, which is called Hard Shot. You just charge up a hard bow, kinda like Cupid, and you just shoot it to exactly where you want. The X ability is also kinda similar to this. You shoot a bow and it locks to above the player's head, and as long as they're standing in the circle it spawns in, it keeps doing a huge amount of damage to them. The C ability is called Irresistible Attraction. It creates a huge circle where the user is standing, and once it releases, any player that's standing inside the circle gets a bunch of damage dealt to them. Next up is the V ability, which is called Best of Friendo, and what this ability basically does is it spawns in a friend from your friends list to fight for you. Isn't that pretty cool? Finally, we got the F ability, and this one is called Flamingo Ride, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You literally just spawn in a flamingo and you can fly on it. You can use the other abilities of this fruit while you're flying, and if you have the Best of Friendo move equipped, then your best friend gets on the flamingo with you. Really good thing about this fruit is that all its moves cast very quickly and they have really less startup time. And the Flamingo Ride can be used a lot for sky camping, especially if you're fighting against fruits that don't have aerial abilities. But this fruit is kinda useless in PvP due to its bad hitboxes, and its abilities are kind of easy to dodge. Out of every fruit on this list, I would say by far this is probably the one that's least worth it, because it costs so much money.
You serious?
Next up on the list, we got the Spider Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 1,500,000 belly, or 1,800 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It only has a 4% chance of being in stock and a 5.7% chance of spawning. And this fruit also has an awakening, which costs a total of 17,300 fragments, making it a really expensive fruit to awaken. The Z ability is called Spider Wrap. You kind of just shoot out air slashes, kind of like a sword's ability, making it pretty cool. The X ability is called Multi-String Attack, and this spawns in a bunch of strings above where you're aiming, deals a decent amount of damage, and also stuns them for a brief amount of time. The C ability is called Overheated Sniper, and this is where the player shoots a thick rope made out of condensed strings, which deals a huge amount of damage depending on where you're aiming at. The V ability is probably one of the coolest abilities in the game. It's called Ultimate Thread. It creates multiple strings that are all covered in the aura color of the user, and once activated pierces anything in its way, dealing a huge amount of damage, and it has a really good range. The F ability is called Spider's Path, and this one is probably one of the coolest movement abilities in this game, and it makes you feel and look just like Spider-Man. Good thing about this fruit is that it has really high damage, and its abilities are best used for killing bosses, and has really insane combo potential. But if you want to use this fruit in PvP, you have to have really good aim, so if you have bad aim, this is probably not the fruit for you. And next on the list, we got the Phoenix Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 1,800,000 belly, or 2,000 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit has a 3% chance of being in stock and a 3.05% chance of spawning in game. This fruit also has an awakening which costs 18,500 fragments, making it the costliest awakening on this list so far. So first up, we got the Z ability, which is called Cannon. And the user charges up a flaming bow that's released forward and does a decent amount of damage. It's similar to the Gravity Fruit's X ability. And the X ability for this fruit is called Regeneration Flames, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You just cover yourself in flames and heal a lot of your health back. The C ability is called Fast Kick. And this launches a really overpowered kick in the direction of where the user is looking, dealing a good amount of knockback and damage to anyone that gets hit by it. Next up is the V ability, which is called Full Transformation. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The user completely transforms themselves into a phoenix. And this is probably one of the coolest transformations I've seen in Blox Fruits. Next up, we got the movement ability, which is called Hybrid Flight. And you kind of just flap your wings and fly around. Pretty cool thing about this is you don't have to be transformed to do it. A good / bad thing about this ability is that its V1 and V2 abilities are really similar. The only major difference is that the V2 deals way more damage. It's not really that good of a fruit for grinding because it deals a bunch of knockback on most of its attacks. So if you're trying to grind NPCs, this is probably not the fruit for you. Next up, we got the door fruit. the portal fruit. And this fruit costs a total of 1,900,000 belly or 2,000 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. And has a 7% chance of being in stock with a 6.8% chance of spawning randomly. The portal fruit has a passive ability, and when you use your mouse button, it does a portal jump, launching you in a direction that you're looking at. The C ability is called Portal Dash, and you can use this either as a movement ability, or if you dash into someone, it just sends them through a stream of portals, and then it finally slams them into the floor, dealing a good amount of damage and stuns them for a second. The X ability is called Parallel Escape. And what this ability does is it takes you to another dimension, and when you're in this dimension, other users can't see you. It lasts a few seconds and it cancels the ability if you attack a user first. Remember before when I said the light fruit was the fastest in the game? Well, I kinda lied. The C ability for this fruit is called World Warp, and you can basically teleport anywhere you want on the map. You just have to click the ability and click the location you want to teleport to. The V ability is called Dimensional Rift, and what this does is it sucks players into an alternate dimension. And this alternate dimension lasts for as long as the user's energy lasts. If you're a user with max energy, then it's kind of overpowered. Next up is the F ability, which is the movement ability, and what this does is it basically creates two portals. And once you walk into one, you obviously come out of the other end. But keep in mind, if non-allied players or NPCs try walking to this, they will take a decent amount of damage. It's probably the best mobility fruit in the whole of Blox Fruits, and it's really good for escaping any type of players. And a lot of its attack patterns are completely unpredictable, making it kind of a bit decent in a fight, but it's not really a PvP based fruit. And this fruit also does only mediocre damage at best, so it's not recommended, unless you just want to get to locations really fast. Next up on the list, we got the Rumble Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 2,100,000 belly, or 2,100 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It has only a 2.25% chance of being in stock and a 2.31% chance of spawning in. This fruit can also be awakened, which costs a total of 14,500 fragments. The Z ability is called Rumble Dragon, and this is where the user shoots a swirling lightning dragon that explodes exactly when it hits someone. The X ability is called Sky Thunder. You just summon a bunch of thunder to exactly where you point at, and it hits whoever's in the radius. The C ability is called Sky Beam. Summons a giant lightning beam from the sky, and it levitates the target when hit, and it does a really good amount of damage and a pretty decent stun. The V ability is called Thunder Bomb. The user gathers a bunch of thunder clouds into a big black ball, and you can launch it exactly where you want, and it deals a lot of damage depending on how long you charge it for. The F ability is called Lightning Dash, and this is kind of just a rip-off of your normal dash ability, except it's just a bit faster. Overall, not that good of a movement ability. Good thing about this fruit is that it has really long stuns and pretty good mobility, since its dashes are much faster than the average ones. But compared to other movement abilities, it's not that good. And it has really high mastery requirements. I mean, you literally need to have 250 mastery to use all the abilities. That's pretty high if you ask me. Okay, so moving on, we got the paw fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 2,300,000 belly, or 2,200 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit has only a 1.9% chance of being stock and a 2.8% chance of spawning randomly. The first ability is called Heavy Paw, and it's kind of just shoot a small paw out of your hand, and it just goes in a straight line, and it has really good range. But it's kind of hard to aim, so make sure you got your mouse ready. The X ability is called Paw Barrage, and it's kind of the same ability as the Heavy Paw, except you shoot a bunch of them, similar to the Flame Fruit's first ability. The C ability is called Paw Nuke. This is where you spawn in a huge paw in your hand and you can shoot it exactly where you want, and it deals a huge amount of damage where it lands, and flinging anybody that's hit high into the air. The V ability is called Torture, and for this one you choose a large, long-range, red, pulsating paw that blinds opponents and deals damage over time. And this ability also breaks observation, so it's a really good ability. The F ability is called Self-Repel, and basically what it does is you teleport backwards really far and you kind of just spring back to the place you were. Not sure what the point of this ability, but I guess it is what it is. It is what it is. The really good thing about this fruit is that it's really good for PvP and bounty hunting, and it does a huge amount of damage. But on the downside, you need really good aim and precision to hit your targets. And you also need really high mastery requirements to use this. But it's not recommended for beginners because it's kind of hard to use. Next up, we got the Blizzard Fruit. And this fruit costs a total of 2,400,000 belly, or 2,225 Robux. It only has a 1.8% stock chance and a 1.2% chance of spawning in-game. The first ability is called Snowflake Shuriken, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You kind of just shoot a shuriken that's made out of snow at your player, and it explodes on impact and does a pretty decent amount of damage. The X ability is called Whiteout, and you just send a tornado flying in the direction you're looking at that just stuns enemies and sends them flying away. The C ability is called Howling Wind, and this one is also Tornado, but this one spawns in place and it holds enemies in air, stunning them and preventing them from using any abilities. Next up is the V ability. This one is called Blizzard Domination, and this is just a better version of the Ice Fruit's ability. And similar to the Control Fruit, if the enemies in this dome, they will be heavily damaged, and it pulls every enemy inside here and does not let them escape. The F ability is called Tornado Flight, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You just fly around in a tornado, and if you run into an enemy, it just slings them out of the way. But you should probably not be using this one for PvP. This ability has a lot of stuns, making it really good for farming bosses, and it also has really good combo potential. But a bad thing about it is that since a lot of its abilities knock the players away, it's kinda hard to use in combos, so I don't really recommend this fruit for beginners.
Okay.
Next up, we got the first mythical fruit on this list, the Gravity Fruit. It costs a total of 2,500,000 belly, or 2,300 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It has a 1.7% chance of being in stock and a 1.6% chance of spawning. The Z ability is called Gravity Push. It creates a strong gravitational force in front of them, launching enemies backwards and displacing the ground in front of them. The X ability is called Gravity Obscurance, and in this one, a user creates a glowing crater beneath themselves and makes gravity push down on all enemies trapped inside. The C ability is called Meteor Pitch, and for this one, you just shoot a purple beam upwards, and the meteor slam down just like how you should slam the subscribe button right now. The V ability is called Meteor Rain, and this is similar to the Light Fruit's ability, but instead of light, it's real meteors, and they deal a huge amount of damage where they spawn in. The F ability is called Boulder Flight, and this one is pretty simple. You just summon in a rideable boulder that lets you fly in your desired direction. The good thing about this fruit is that it has really decent damage, and it's pretty good for stunning. It's really bad in air combat though. You would think that meteors would be good in the air, but I guess they're not. Now finally we got the fruit that everyone has been waiting for, the Dough Fruit. The Dough Fruit costs a total of 2,800,000 belly, or 2,400 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. It has a 1.4% chance of being in stock and a 1.3% chance of spawning. And to fully awaken this fruit, you need a total of 18,500 fragments. The Z ability of this fruit is called Fried Dough, where you just kind of spawn in a missile and you just shoot it. If you actually angle it right, a funny glitch kind of happens. The player you shoot it at actually rides the missile. For the X ability, we got Sticky Dough, and what this does is that you just bring out a huge whip type of thing, you capture the opponent that you're fighting against, completely slams them into the ground in that direction. The C ability is called Carved Dough, and you kind of spawn in a roller donut, and once you let go of it, you launch yourself from the sky and deal a huge amount of damage. The V ability is called Restless Dough Barrage, and this is a really cool ability, and it gets even more overpowered when awakened. It locks your opponent in place, not letting them move or anything. As long as you're holding down the key, it just keeps punching them for a huge amount of time, dealing a lot of damage. Next up, we got the F ability. This one is called Roller Donut, and you just roll around on a donut. And once your food is awakened, you can actually roll this donut on water and straight up walls, making it really overpowered. Really good thing about this fruit, it's known for its PvP abilities when it's awakened. The abilities when awakened look really cool and they make really satisfying noises. The only bad thing about it is that it's really difficult to awaken and it takes a lot of time since you need to kill the Dough King before you do it. And he's pretty hard to kill. Okay, so next up on the list, we got the Shadow Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 2,900,000 belly, or 2,425 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. This is also mythical fruit, and it has a 1.3% chance of being in stock with a 1.1% chance of spawning randomly. So its Z ability is called Somber Rebellion. So what it does is you basically launch yourself in the direction of your cursor, and when you come into contact with an enemy, you hit them a bunch of times, and then you fly up into the sky. A decent amount of damage, but you need pretty good aim to use it. The X ability is called Shadow's Nest. You shoot a bunch of small shadow bombs towards your enemy and they explode on impact. And they deal a bunch of decent damage and a good amount of knockback. Third ability is called Nightmare Leash, and it's similar to one of the God Human's abilities. You slam yourself into your enemy, and as long as you hold the key down, you punch them rapidly for a good amount of time, dealing a lot of damage. The next ability is called Corvus Torment, and this is similar to one of the Dark Fruit's abilities. You basically turn your body into a black hole and then making a huge explosion and dealing a lot of damage to people next to you. And then finally we got the F ability, which is called Umbarage, and this is basically the Flame Fruit's fly ability, but it's in its own shadow form, which looks pretty cool in my opinion. The good thing about this fruit is the amount of damage it deals. It's literally one of the most powerful fruits in Blox Fruits, and it's really underrated in my opinion. Pretty bad thing is that it has really high mastery requirements. You need a total of 300 mastery just to be able to use every single ability. But overall, it's still a really good fruit. Moving on, we got the Venom Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 3 million belly, or 245 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit has a measly 1.2% chance of being in stock and a 1.1% chance of spawning in. Okay, so the first ability for this fruit is called Poison Daggers, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You basically just fire a bunch of poison daggers towards your enemy, dealing a good amount of damage and a bit of knockback. The second ability is called Noxious Shot, and this one just shoots a swarm of venom bullets towards where you're aiming at. 3 in total, and it deals a lot of damage, and a bit of the venom stays behind, dealing a bit of extra burn damage. The third ability is called Toxic Fog, and this basically gives you a huge aura that surrounds you in a bunch of toxic smoke. And when you walk next to anybody, they take a good amount of damage. Next up is the V ability, and this one is the Transformation, and this looks really cool, turning you into a 3-headed venom monster, which buffs every single one of your abilities, making you way more overpowered. Finally, we got the Movement's ability, which is called Serpent's Wrath, and this one basically just lets you fly around in a venomous serpent, and once you crash it into somewhere, it leaves behind a big blob of venom that deals a good amount of damage. The really good thing about this fruit is its transformation. Once you activate your transformation, all of your attacks get buffed by 62%. And the best thing about this fruit is that it specializes in 2 things, air and ground combat, so it doesn't matter where your opponent is. But a pretty bad thing about it is all its moves have limited range. And this is probably one of the hardest fruits to get in the game, so if you want it, then good luck getting it. Next on the list is the Control Fruit, and this fruit costs a total of 3,200,000 belly, or 2,500 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. It has a total 1% chance of being in stock and a 1.9% chance of spawning randomly. Okay, so the Z ability of the Control Fruit is creating the dome. It's called Control Area. And depending on how long you hold the key down, that's how big the dome that you create is. The X ability is called Levitate, and both of these abilities have only a 1 mastery requirement, so you get both of them as soon as you unlock your fruit. And what Levitate lets you do is move around objects inside the dome you create, which is really overpowered. You can move buildings, trees, and basically whatever's inside. Even boats. The C ability is called Echo Knife, and this is a pretty cool ability. And this is similar to one of the God Human's abilities. It basically locks your user in place, not letting them move and punching them several amounts of times. Next up is the V ability, and this one's called Gamma Rush. This is where you launch a green projectile towards where your cursor is, and if it hits an NPC or player, that means they're locked in, and you will begin hitting them numerous amount of times, and they just have to sit there and take all that damage. There's no way to escape it. Next up is the F ability, and this one's called Teleport. And basically wherever you click, you instantly teleport to inside the dome that you create, and this ability is really good. The really good thing about this fruit is that its Levitate ability has the lowest cooldown out of every ability in the whole game, making it really overpowered and spammable. But a bad thing about this fruit is that you can only use its abilities when you're inside the dome that you create, so if you're outside, then this fruit is kinda useless. But then again, you can just create a new dome whenever you want. Moving on, we got the Spirit Fruit, and the Spirit Fruit costs a total of 3,400,000 belly, or 2,550 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. This fruit only has a 1% chance of being in stock and a 0.75% chance of spawning randomly. So the first ability is called Frostfire Grasp. You just jump on a cloud and fly towards the position of your cursor. Then you summon a spear which damages and stuns people. The X ability is called Wrath of Ra. And this is where the user sends a demon spirit towards the position of their cursor. And once it hits a player, it turns into a pillar of fire, damaging people and launching 5 fireballs into the air. The C ability is called Wrath of Shu. You quickly dash to your cursor's location and create a bunch of ice around the user, and then it freezes your opponent and causes a constant amount of damage to them. The V ability is called End of Times, and for this one you use both the buddies, the fire one and the ice one, to shoot 2 huge beams to your cursor, stunning your enemy and dealing a butt ton of damage. The F ability is called Sky Ruler, and for this one you hop on one of your buddies and you can just fly them off to wherever you want. Really good thing about this food is every single move that it has is an area of damage, which means you do splash damage to every enemy that you hit. So it's really good for grinding and fighting off groups of people. But a pretty bad thing about it is that these moves are kinda slow compared to all fruits, so it might not be the best for a fight. Overall, still a really overpowered fruit and one of the coolest fruits in Blox Fruits. Next up, we got the Dragon Fruit, and this is a beast-type Blox Fruit, and it costs a total of 3,500,000 belly, or 2,600 Robux. It has a 1% chance of being in stock and a 0.7% chance of spawning randomly. And a really cool thing about this fruit is that it has the biggest transform model in the game. I mean, this dragon is really huge. So the first ability is called Heatwave Beam. You just shoot a huge beam of energy, and wherever you're aiming it does a bunch of damage. The X ability is called Dragonic Claw. You coat your hand in flames and then you rush forward towards an enemy, and if you grab them you can drag them along the floor, dealing a bunch of damage. Next up is the C ability, and this one's called Fire Shower. And it's similar to one of the Light Fruit's abilities. You just jump high up in the air and then you can shoot fireballs wherever you aim. The V ability is the Transformation. This is where you turn into a literal dragon, and it's one of the coolest transformations in Blox Fruit. The F ability is called Dragon Flight, and this one is pretty self-explanatory. You're just flying, just like a dragon does. You even grow a pair of wings. 2 really good things about this food is that it's really good for PvP and it's really good for mobility. Pretty bad thing about this food is that it has really high mastery requirements. To use all the abilities of this food, you need a total of 350 mastery, making it pretty difficult to grind out. But it's definitely worth the transformation. Next up, we got the fruit that you all have been waiting for, the Leopard Fruit. And this fruit costs a total of 5 million belly, making it the most expensive fruit in Blox Fruits, as well as 3,000 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit has only a 0.3% chance of being in stock and a 2.5% chance of spawning in game. So the first ability is called Finger Revolver, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You kind of just shoot a bunch of bullets out of your hand and they deal a lot of damage and knockback. The X ability is called Spiraling Kick, and you kick the air so hard that it sends out a beam of air going towards your enemy, and if they get caught in it, they get dragged along with it until it explodes somewhere. And it deals a lot of damage, and it also disables observation, making it really good. This C ability is called After Image Assault. And this is where the user teleports a bunch of times in the curse's direction, then lets out a roar that deals a bunch of damage and knockback. But if you're on the ground while you use this attack, then you just smash it exactly where you are. The V ability is obviously the transformation, and you basically just transform into a leopard, which gives you a buff of 10% damage reduction, and has an area of damage roar on every 4th click, making it really overpowered. And you also get an extra mouse one ability. The F ability is called Body Flicker, and this is basically where you teleport in the direction of your ability. And you also deal a good amount of damage. It's kind of like a mini flash step. The best thing about this fruit, in my opinion, is that it's the second best PvP fruit in this whole game, second to the Awakened Doe. And its transformation is also really overpowered because of your M1 attacks, and the 4th one, which literally breaks observation, making it really overpowered. A pretty bad thing about this fruit is that once you transform yourself into a leopard, you can't use any combat styles as well as swords. You have to stick with only the abilities of the fruit.